Well, hello and welcome to another Monday night Q&A. I'm joined tonight by my colleague Dean Kinsella from the Area Engineers team. Good evening, Dean.
Hi Sam, how you doing?
I'm good, and how are you?
Good. How's today been for you? Start of the week?
Yeah, it's always a Monday. It was a little bit quiet, if anything, this Monday. We had sort of a bit of a flurry around dinner time and a bit of a flurry towards the end of the night. But yeah, quite a steady, quiet day for a Monday, really. I suppose there's a few people starting to take the benefit of holidays and that now. So maybe we're seeing a little bit of a quieter period.
Take the opportunity to get yourself sorted then, yeah.
Absolutely, yeah. No, I'm not complaining. Don't get me wrong. I'm not complaining at all. And how about yourself? Anything exciting today, or?
Yes and no. I mean, every day is a learning, is a school day. So I was in North London today. That's where I'm based. Couple of contractors around the Palmer's Green area. Bit of domestic installation work, out buildings, bit of a chat on PME, extraneous parts, and in the afternoon went to a local theatre where they've done some adaptations to small power for sockets in the lighting rig area, just for some of the equipment. So nothing too exciting, but interesting all the same.
Yeah, nice.
It's always a good topic of discussion to have on technical sort of variations and do's and don'ts and whys and why not. So yes, interesting, but nothing extraordinary.
I guess once you get into it, sometimes you can quite easily run out of time.
I'm there till the death. You get added value out of me, that's for sure.
Okay. Absolutely, I don't doubt it for a minute. So we'll I'll just push up the question of the week. So just as a reminder for people that didn't get an opportunity to see it through Facebook or YouTube or one of the other social media channels, question of the week that came in last week was: do cables running ceiling voids require the additional protection of a 30 milliamp RCD? So that was, do cables that are running in ceiling voids require the additional protection of an RCD? So what's your thoughts on that, Dean?
Well, thoughts, and obviously going with BS7671, the answer is no. That is it. Obviously there's more things to discuss, but initially let's say no. And it's not because of the location, it's more because of the risk factors involved, or the perception of what risk may be involved. So you're looking at more of what damage can be caused to the cables in the ceiling void, as opposed to cables that may be buried in a wall or in a partition. So what your way of thinking is, there's going to be less fixings put into ceilings and floors in comparison to walls and partitions.
Yeah.
With regards to BS7671, general rules do apply. Suitability of the cables to the environment in which they are being used, ensuring that you've got the correct method of installation for the conditions to be encountered. And for those who've got a pen and paper, Reg 512.2.1 is what we've linked to there. But obviously there may be other reasons to consider as well. So rather than being in a ceiling void, example, RCD protection may be required for circuits that serve a bathroom, or where there's a TT arrangement. So you still may be a requirement, even though they are in a ceiling void, to provide RCD protection by means of 30 milliamp for circuits in bathrooms, or where the installation has TT at the origin.
Yeah, absolutely. I think that's spot on. So no, based on that specific environment, there's no requirement for RCD protection, but there may be other reasons, like you say. What about, are there specific requirements for cables in ceiling voids? Is it covered in 7671?
Answer is yes. And again, those who have a pen and paper, 522.6.201. You've got there's a few different pieces of information in that regulation. So, and I'll go through a few of them now. Obviously, looking at a cable that's installed in a floor or above a ceiling shall, and I'm going to quote a bit here, be run in such a position that it's not liable to be damaged by contact with the floor or ceilings or their fixings. So basically you're looking at within the fabric of the building, cables need to be at least 50 mil. Within floorboards from vertically from the top or the bottom as appropriate, with your joist as you're looking at it in the middle, so to speak, or the batten, and the regulation for that is 522.6.204. Where you're not going to use an RCD 30 milliamp, where it's less than 50 mil, you've got other options available. You can incorporate it, use an earth metallic covering, which will comply with the requirements of BS 7671. Obviously, it needs to have a link to the earthing system by means of a protected conductor, or you can install it in earthed conduit as well. Same applies, it must be earthed. Or it can be enclosed in earthing and trunking or ducting. Same rules apply with regards to being earthed. Other things you're looking at is with regards to maybe going for a selve or a PELV type circuit, if it's going to be within that 50 mil depth of the floor, ceilings or walls. So there's a few different options available there, but generally less than 50 mil RCD or earth mechanical protection, or go down the lines of selve or PELV.
Yeah, so I think we actually came to that same reg, that 204 reg, last week when we were talking about extra low voltage cables in walls, about the degree of protection. So came back to us there as well. So there is a specific reg, like you say, but it talks about really just not running it in such a way that it's not likely to be damaged. So, you know, a typical example or poor installation would be where we put a cable above a joist, knowing that the floor or the ceiling's going to sit on top of that and then impact the cable. So that's the thing. And I guess floors, I always used to think about, you know, when you're going through doorways that might well have, you know, a carpet gripper nailed down into it. So yeah, there are areas, but generally it's just run it in a route where it's not likely to be damaged, because as we said with the first bit, you're less likely to have fixings into the floors and ceilings, much different from the wall. And then just lastly, as a sort of a final follow up on that, what about so it talks about 50 mil from the floor, 50 mil from the ceiling.
Yeah, so obviously people always ask the question, why are we using 50 mil as a measurement? And that's usually taken into account nails and screws that may penetrate that particular part of the fabric of the building. The same way as generally a 2-inch screw. If you look at a 2-inch screw, it's quite significant in its length. So you're using that 50 mil as your gauge with regards to your standard screws. Also drilling in joists as well, 50 mil applies to the joists. Again, 2-inch for a fixing or so on and so forth. That's where the measurement comes from. A lot of people do ask that. And it's also mentioned in the building regulations as well, Part A, which is to do with the structural integrity with regards to when you are drilling joists or drilling holes through walls, etc. Yeah,
so we have to have at least 50 mil above and 50 mil below any holes, so that we're not depreciating the structural integrity of that joist. So yeah, Part A, because we have to be, you know, I think we focus very much on Part P, that's the electrical reg, but we actually, when we sign our notifications, we're actually saying that we've complied with all relevant parts of the building regs. So Part A, when we're chasing, when we're notching joints or drilling through joints, it's all a strong consideration.
Yeah, there is sufficient guidance out there, paid or free, from, you know, genuine websites like ourselves and forums, which do give reference to specific guides, associated guidance. Like you said, Sam, it's not just focused on Part P. There's other aspects of building regulations that electricians need to be not so much aware of, but be familiar with and be able to understand.
Yeah, absolutely. Okay, we're starting to get a few questions into the chat. So the first one comes with a good evening. When carrying out a house rewire, with 6mm existing bonds to gas and water, is it an advantage to leave them in place in addition to the new 10mm bonding? So yeah, I think we've got the gist of the question. I think the couple of things I would say is, providing the 6mm bonds are adequate, and they're not showing any signs of thermal damage. So by adequate, I guess I'm talking about that they do actually bond the extraneous conductive parts, and they've got a continuity to the installation's MET. There's no reason to replace them. It would be a recommendation to perhaps bring things up to current standards, which would be 10mm based. I'm assuming that we are talking about a TNCS installation. It's not actually mentioned, but the fact that you're differentiating between 6mm and 10mm. So it's one of those situations. A brand new installation, we would suggest that you have to comply with regs and go minimum of 10mm on a TNCS. But if there's some existing 6mm and they're not showing any signs of thermal damage, you could consider reusing them. It would be a recommendation then to upgrade, but not a regulatory requirement, providing they're in good condition, you've proved the continuity, there's no signs of thermal damage, and you're not likely to, as part of your rewire, increase the installation, which then might have a detrimental effect on any circulating currents in the bonding conductors. Would you agree with that, or add any more, Dean?
Yeah, I think obviously, well, now add a bit more. Obviously, you mentioned about verifying continuity of it, but ensuring that the continuity value that you get is within what the industry guidance recommends, between extraneous conductive part at 0.05 ohms. That's mentioned in guidance note 3, the IET inspection testing guide. Obviously, make sure you get your labels in place, and maybe good idea to record that somewhere on your certificate on a continuation page, that it has been verified, that there's no signs of thermal damage to the existing protective conductors as well.
Yeah, it's a good point about documenting it, because I think sometimes when we see something and we're happy with it, we don't actually document that we've confirmed things, and then of course the next one comes along, and being how horrible we are as an electrician, we like to point out where the last person didn't do what they were supposed to do. So yeah, it's a really good point to, even if it's something that you've seen, it's existing, it's part of the existing installation already, document the fact that you've verified it, you know, through inspection, through test, so that you've done something to confirm its adequacy for continued use, and document that, even if you haven't done anything, so you haven't changed it in any way, just document the fact that you've done everything reasonably practical to confirm its adequacy for continued use. That's a really good point. Okay, we've got another one which is a common, very common, non-fire rated downlighters with a room above C2 or C3. So the fact that you mention a room above, that tells me that line of question is going down building regs, because building regulations talk about, if I've got a non-robust construction in the property and I've got a habitable room above, then I need to have fire rated downlighters. But bear in mind that is a building regulation requirement. So if you are down that route on an EICR, we would suggest you record that as an observation, but because it's not electrical safety, it's actually fire safety, then it shouldn't affect the outcome of your electrical condition report. Electrical wise, if you comply with manufacturer's instructions, so you don't put the fitting too close to combustible material, i.e. the joist, you don't cover the fitting in insulation when it shouldn't be, you don't put the wrong type of lamp in the fitting so that it's got the chance to overheat. If you comply with manufacturer's instructions, generally you meet the requirements of 7671. So it's only if one of those things is an error would you consider coding it. if it purely is the fact that there's a habitable room above and you've not been able to confirm that you've got robust construction, that's a building regs driver. So in that instance, building regs wise, by all means record it as an observation, but don't give it a classification code. Would you agree with that, Dean?
Yeah, there's not much more to add on to that, Sam. I think you've hit it spot on there. It's more of a building regulation. Again, it's fit for purpose. You wouldn't be able to buy the light if it wasn't fit for purpose. And I think a lot of contractors forget that. It wouldn't be on the market if it wasn't able to be fitted. Yeah. It's just obviously ensuring that you do comply with manufacturer's instructions, and if you do, then the installation should be safe and fit for continued use.
Yeah. And there's some very good. We've got a slide to show you at the very end about the other best practice guides. We talk a lot about best practice guide number 4, but there's also in the same series a very good document, best practice guide number 5, which is about electrical safety in electrical installations and the effect on safety. And that gives you a great table of where fire rated downlighters are recommended through building regs. And it even goes into one of the appendices to discuss about what does robust construction mean, and it goes down to the detail of robust construction means joists of a certain depth, certain centres apart, thickness of floors, thickness of ceiling. So again, best practice guide 5, if you've not got it already, very good document to download with respect to fire safety. Another question that's come in through the chat room, if carried out an EICR on a domestic property and it requires a rewire, does a bathroom fan need to be installed, bearing in mind the property is 50 years plus and it has a window in there? So again, it's actually another building regs related question, because BS 7671 won't require a fan to be fitted in the bathroom, and if you're not materially altering the bathroom, then we don't believe you'd be required to fit it. If it was a new bathroom, or you converted, let's say you converted a small bedroom, you put an ensuite, now it's a new bathroom, then your new bathroom has to comply with current building regs and would require ventilation. But if as part of your rewire you're not doing anything to the bathroom, then it shouldn't be involved with building regs. But we always say, where you're in doubt, just contact the local authority, building control, because ultimately they were the ones that will police your building regulation requirements, and hopefully they will agree with us. If there's no structural alteration to the property, so there's no building inspection required, then you won't need to comply with updated building regs, which would insist on a fan in a new bathroom.
Yeah, I think obviously, well, not think, but Part F, approved document Part F goes with ventilation, and so obviously have a look at that document, and then if you are going to install the fan, again, read the manufacturer instructions, because some of them require local fused isolation, which is generally or can be less than 6 amp, which is obviously your standard overcurrent protector device you would install for a general lighting circuit. You might require to put a local fuse spare for the control and safety of the fan in question as well. Yeah,
very much, because fans are one of those things that when they do go wrong can actually pull more current than they should do. So hence the requirement to provide a means of overload protection. Another one that's come into the chat room: what code would you advise for a washing machine in a shower room with no RCD protection and only 2 meters from the shower enclosure? There's no bath in the room and no washing machine. There is no bath in the room and the washing machine is not in a cupboard. Okay, so we've got a washing machine, no RCD protection, only 2 meters from the shower enclosure. I'm guessing that we've got then therefore a socket outlet, only in 2 meters. So a few things there. What's your first thoughts on that, Dean?
Well, first thing is obviously if it is a socket outlet or not. That's the first thing to decide, because socket outlets in bathrooms is against BS 7671 unless it's beyond 3 meters within the bathroom. You've also got to consider the circuit in question coming into the bathroom, if it's got additional protection provided to it. Generally nowadays we go for 30 milliamp RCD. And the third point I'm thinking of is the washing machine suitable for the environment? What sort of IP rating does it have? And the final point, I suppose, 2 meters away from the shower, was it, were you saying?
Yeah, it's just 2 meters from the shower. I'm guessing that's the point of connection. But yeah, okay. As you say, so and also the lack of RCD protection. So if we say the circuit's got no RCD protection, then if the circuit's got no RCD protection and there isn't adequate supplementary bonding, then there's a recommendation for a C2. I think also if the socket outlet's within 2 meters and readily accessible, so somebody could come in and actually unplug the washing machine, plug their extension lead in for their radio that sits on the side of the bath and topples in, there's your other C2 as well. So yeah, it based on what you've told us, I think we'd be looking at C2s unless there's some really strange and unusual things that are preventing it. As Dean said, it makes a big difference if it's not a socket outlet. If it's actually got a permanent connection, then we're just going down the route of making sure the IP rating's correct, workmanship, but you would still want supplementary bonding if there's no RCD. So the CPC of that circuit would need to be connected with any other exposed or extraneous conductive parts that are simultaneously accessible. So so without that, again, you'd be looking at a C2.
Yeah, there's a few things obviously going on with that particular discussion as we highlighted anyway. And I suppose the other thing to consider, if it's a tenanted property, does the landlord own the washing machines that permanently stay in there, or does the tenant own it? Therefore, if you have got a socket outlet, once that washing machine's been unplugged and taken away by a tenant, then that socket then could be seen as being more readily accessible, whereas I was occupied, it wasn't. And will a washing machine go back in there?
Yeah.
There's a few things to discuss and weigh up, I suppose, as an engineering judgment point of view for the inspector.
Yeah, very much so. Bathroom fan isolation switch, is it required always? So a couple of things there. So our great book says that every item of equipment, every circuit, every installation needs a means of isolation that's readily available for operation. So I think when it comes to the fan isolator, it's really a situation about considering manufacturer's instructions, because the manufacturer may require it. But also, if the manufacturer doesn't, there's nothing in the manufacturer's or the installation instructions, then it's a consideration of the safety impact, and that's the part that says your means of isolation must be readily available. So I think the guidance there would be, if your fan is low down and you've got the possibility of entrapment or entanglement for the users of that operation, or you know that it's going to be maintained, then you'd want a means of isolation that would be local, so that if somebody did get clothing or hair entrapped or entangled in it, then the placement for ready operation means local. So you might consider, if it's up high in the corner, out of the way, where it's not likely to create a hazard for the users of the installation, then perhaps you can rely on a more remote means of isolation, even perhaps the breaker in the board for the circuit. So that's the guidance there. And then the thing to bear in mind is, if you are going remote, then it has to be capable of being locked in the off position, because the last thing you want is for you to isolate it and then go and open it up to do your manual operation, only for somebody to walk past the board and re-energize it. So if it's remote, it must be capable of being locked in the off position. But potentially you could have it remote if the manufacturer accepts it in their installation instructions, and if you deem that it's in such a location that it's not likely to create a hazard.
Yeah, I think the other thing just to note on that is you said readily accessible. You come across a lot of installations where the client wants the isolator to be out of view, which can sometimes conflict with readily accessible. So it is down to the contractor to sort of point out to the client that they're the skilled person, explain to them what the true purpose of that isolator is for maintenance regards the fan. So it can be installed more readily accessible rather than being hidden out the way where it's not going to really serve its purpose.
Yeah. And we've got somebody, it sort of raised a few questions, that the common one about you have to fuse down the switch live at a bathroom fan to 3 amp from the lighting circuit, which is often, as you mentioned before, part of the installation instructions from the manufacturer. You can do this with a fan isolator switch with a fuse next to the switch. How are people down rating the permanent live that keeps the run timer going, as this needs to be fused also to 3 amp? So you will find there are now isolators on the market with that additional fuse to allow you to build it all into the one device, because it's quite a common, I wouldn't say problem, it's not a problem, but it's a common issue with the manufacturers that will have a run timer, so you need that permanent live as well as the switched live. But yeah, if you do a bit of research, you'll find that there's quite a few different makes and manufacturers that will provide that isolator with that built in.
Yeah, you can get them as part of the kit with the actual fan itself. There's a few on the market. I've come across a few. A lot of the housing associations and councils are pushing that way and installing these fans with the kits with the local isolation fuse present. So they are readily available.
Okay. Just a comment on one of the previous questions when we were talking about the rewire with existing 6mm bonds needing to go to 10. I think somebody's confirmed that it is actually a TT system. If that's the case, then 6mm is perfectly adequate. So 10mm the minimum requirement for TNCS, but TNS and TT still do have a 6mm minimum requirement. So on that rewire, providing the bonding conductors are no less than half the required incoming main, which on a TT system typically needs to just be quite small because you've got high earth fault loop impedances, which means you've got low earth fault currents. So you'll find that 6mm will probably be adequate for most domestic TTs. And then lastly, we've got, what's the NIC view on type AC RCDs when carrying out EICRs? Well, it's not a requirement to have type AC everywhere, and so I jumped ahead. So reading it again properly for the second time. What's the NIC view on type AC RCDs when carrying out EICRs? The AC RCD, it's still acceptable. It's still in the regs for general use, providing you can prove that it still works. It would be worth an investigation to see if you have got any items of equipment generating DC currents. But if you can prove that the AC works, again, we're talking about this being on the basis that generally, and I know it's not always the case, but generally the RCD's there for additional protection. The breaker's there for fault protection or short circuit protection, breaker or fuse. So yeah, we don't see that there's a direct problem of still having existing installations with type AC RCDs, so long as we can confirm what they're being used for, and if it is typically additional protection only, that we can confirm that they are still providing it by doing the relevant test.
Yeah, I think they might have been leading towards where we're moving on to more of the newer Type A type device. Well, not newer, but within the UK, moving towards that way. Obviously, with the more DC equipment that you have in your installation, it might impact the effectiveness of a Type A RCD. So it's always worth, if it's part of a periodic, having a look around the installation to see what sort of equipment's present. And then again, just making a note on a periodic, just to conclude your findings, to support the fact that although there's DC present, it's not going to show a potential danger. It's just sort of highlighting the fact that due to newer methods of installation and equipment, that it might not work to its full capabilities, but it's no danger at present.
And I think it's worth also saying that that's part of the conversation with the customer, so or the landlord. What's new? What have you done new? What equipment have you bought new? Have you got new lighting in? And then have a look. What does that manufacturer recommend? We're seeing it now that manufacturers of appliances are becoming aware of this, and they're specifying, even on things like boilers, that they're saying that they actually need a DC tolerant RCD. So we're always suggesting that you do everything reasonably practical. You can't, you test the RCD in situation according to the manufacturer's instructions, preferably from the front of the RCD. That's what the manufacturers will tell you without a load. So it's then a situation of, okay, well, we've tested the installation, it's got type ACs. You have that conversation, going forward, if you want to do everything possible to try and future-proof based on new appliances, based on new equipment, you may need to consider in the future, have those conversations without necessarily having to, it shouldn't be a tactic of, oh, there's something new now, so we should be replacing everything. We'd spend all our time doing refurbs and we'd never get any new installation work done if that was the case.
Yeah, and again, just document it on within the condition report. The conversation's been held with the client, and making what equipment is present, that there's no signs of concern or damage to the RCD. And at least that way there's a paper trail there for future periodics when they take place, something to compare to.
Yeah, absolutely. Okay, time's racing again, so we'll finish with a good common one. An installation uses automatic disconnection supply as a protective measure against electric shock, but the same installation has one or more items of double insulated equipment installed, for example luminaires. On the schedule of inspections, should the double insulation box for both basic and full protection as a method of protection against electric shock be ticked? So this is our schedule of inspections. I've got some items of double insulation. Should I be ticking that box?
No, is the answer. And this comes up a lot when we do the assessments on the inspection schedule. There's a lot of discussion points with regards to that particular section within the schedule of items. So the answer is no. What you've got to remember is that the installation is providing ADS, and that is the primary protection for that installation with regards to overcurrent. And what you've also got to consider is that it's only ticking the box for that, where it's the sole protective measure for the installation or the circuit that you're speaking about, which the equipment is being supplied from with the double insulation. So generally you're going to put no on there. Yeah. An example might be an installation where it's under the effective supervision of a skilled person in normal use. Otherwise, for like a domestic installation, you'd be putting no in there.
Yeah.
And the NICIC ITC guide is a good book to make reference to, as well as the IET guidance notes as well with regard to that particular item within the inspection schedule.
Yeah, no, absolutely. So it's only really relevant if you've got an entire circuit or entire installation, as you quite rightly said. And then you have to take note that if you go into Part 4, protection for against electric shock, in the section which does allow double insulation as a permitted method of protection, but it puts those additional requirements in that the installation or the part of the installation that's under the effective measure of double insulation has to be adequately supervised. So we're not talking certainly about a domestic installation. It needs to be an installation that's got that additional requirement.
Yeah, I think generally confusion is where you might have a fan that is double insulated or type of light fitting, that's class 2, or even where they're looking at the meter tails, because they have in an outer insulation, it's perceived that they're classed as double insulated, but it's not the case with regards to this particular subject that we're talking with regards to ADS.
Yeah. Okay. Just a little bit of news. So there's no Wednesday webinar this week. The next one is next week on Wednesday the 2nd of June. The topic for that one is everything you wanted to know about RCDs but were afraid to ask. So if you haven't already, please go to the NICEIC website and register for that event. That's Wednesday the 2nd of June at 8 o'clock. As it's Bank Holiday Monday next week, that's the 31st of May, there'll be no Monday night Q&A next week, so hopefully we'll see you all again in 2 weeks. That's Monday the 7th of June. And I'm just going to flash up a slide. If you haven't already downloaded Best Practice Guide 4, and we talked tonight about Best Practice Guide 5 already. I'm just showing you now a slide where there's a really good set of freely downloadable information available from Electrical Safety First website. Going from Best Practice Guide 1, which is about consumer unit replacements. 4 and 5 we've talked about tonight. There's one on there which talks about reliability of test equipment. So yeah, some really good documents. It's worth also highlighting that the government website now recognises Best Practice Guide 4 as its guidance for EICRs in the private rented sector. And we noticed recently as well that the IET have provided a link to Best Practice Guide 4, and both of those sources, it's the only source of information that they've recommended. So a really good stamp of approval for those 2 documents. I'm always amazed at how quickly these half hours go, and there's another one flown by. So thank you very much. If we didn't get to answer your question tonight, I apologise, and we will keep it. We do go back to the ones. Hopefully we managed to run through a few there, and again, we appreciate your time and effort for putting those into the chat for us. Good night for you as well, Dean.
Yeah, I've enjoyed tonight as always, Sam. It's good being with you, and obviously with all the contractors out there, and some good questions raised, and hopefully some good answers given, and some guidance and some regulations to help support the findings and the answers that have been given tonight. So yeah. Thoroughly enjoyed it as always, and I can't wait to see everybody again.
Yeah, I mean, it's a great industry, really. We were talking, weren't we, before we started, about how we learn something every day. Sometimes when we're looking through the regs for a reg we want, we find something else that we did, and even still we're finding things that we didn't know were there, or we find the answer to the question we were looking for last week. Every day's a school day. So yeah, we never claim to know it all, but we always, between us in the organisation, we're pretty confident we'll have the answer, and we'll always try and find it for you. But yeah, really thanks for the questions, and thanks for keeping us enthused. It's really good.
Keep up the support. Keep us going on these Monday nights. Keep the questions coming in. The more questions that come in there, the more obviously knowledge there is for the industry, and they're raising the standards and providing quality workmanship. Yeah. Everybody that's out there, all the clients.
And it's good to see the way that people help each other. That's what we've got a QS Facebook page for the registered QSs, and that's the purpose of that forum, because I can guarantee you in the day or in the week you'll come across something that you've not seen before, but somebody else may be able to help. So I really, do hope, and we like to foster that environment where we are here to help each other. It's not a bad thing to do, to help someone out of a hole every now and again.
No, definitely not. And keep us going with this. Give us feedback, let us know. Keep them questions coming in.
Yeah. Okay. All right. Well, thanks very much, and we look forward to seeing you again in a fortnight.
Yeah, take care, buddy. Have a nice evening. All the best.